Yesterday we had one of the workshops that was looking at runway excursions and incursions, and in fact it seems that statistically the most damage-prone element of the aviation journey is actually once you've left the active runway and got onto the rest of the airport. Only last week we had the awful collision of a bus carrying maintenance workers crashing into the first of the brand new A320s for Kuwait Airways. Thankfully there were no serious injuries, but the bus came off worse than the aircraft did. The Flight Safety Foundation launched its GAP program, the Ground Accident Prevention Program, following the analysis of data developed by IATA that estimated that 27,000 ramp accidents and incidents happened in 1 year. That's 1 per 1,000 departures that occur every year. They reckoned there were 243,000 people injured each year in these incidents, and the injury rate is 9 per 1,000 departures. Ramp accidents and incidents cost major airlines worldwide at least $10 billion a year, according to the Flight Safety Foundation. These accidents affect airport operations. They result in personal injuries, damage aircraft, facilities, and ground support equipment. So why is it that ground operations are such a safety challenge? Well, we've got a great panel here to actually solve all of those problems in the next 1 hour. And we have with us Natalie Bamford, the Vice President of Safety, UAE Airport Operations for dnata, Captain Mark Burtonwood, the Vice President of Flight Safety for Emirates, and Mohamad Issa, the Director of Ground Operations for Middle East Airways in Beirut. Gentlemen, lady, welcome. Okay, let's start off. Ground damage seen as one of the main causes of safety events in the Middle East. Whose responsibility is it, and why does the equipment operator always get blamed for causing the damage? Is it really their fault? And I think, Natalie, I'm going to start with you on that.
Oh, this is a classic, and I love answering this question because it's true that when anything happens, that you always want to pinpoint the blame on someone. Someone's got to be responsible. But I guess the more important question is not who is responsible, but why did it happen? So I think we all too often focus on the person rather than trying to understand the root causes, share the learnings and implement corrective action so that actually doesn't happen again. So I think that we're a long way off from having a no-blame culture in the industry, and it's something that dnata we're really trying to work hard on in terms of improving our culture so that it's less about the person but the underlying causes and organisational issues that we need to be looking at and addressing.
Mohamad, in Beirut, what are the sort of the challenges? Why do we have ground damage incidents?
During airline ground operations, risks are concentrated at the stationary period, where numerous activities are being performed by various entities. We have the ground handler, the main ground handler. We have the catering, we have the cabin cleaning, we have the fueling people, the line services, water and lavatory. We have the ramp layout, we have the capacity of the airport, we have the congestion times, the peak times, the design of the peak times, and of course, the operators from different companies, the different procedures, with unsynchronized activities. We were used to work for airlines. Now, most of the services are subcontracted, and every entity or every company has its values maybe, its targets, so they are not synchronized. Everyone tries to finish its job as quick as possible to move to another one. And there is also the time pressure on the ground personnel to cope with the market regarding different SLAs, the competition between national carriers or commercial carriers and low-cost carriers, competition between ground handlers, lower rates of ground handling. There are so many factors affecting this. I think during the past years, especially in the Middle East, we experienced a robust growth in traffic and passengers mainly, and cargo as well. I think we were not well prepared to contain or to deal with this growth. Now, according to IATA's 20 letters forecast published lately, we are expecting a robust growth as well. So I think we have no excuse. We should be well prepared to contain the experience issues and develop to contain what is to come and to figure out the actual volume of the threat.
Okay. So, Mark, is it their fault, the equipment operators, or is it yours for actually pushing for faster turnarounds and greater pressure?
No, not at all. I think it's, you know, quite often when you conduct a full investigation, you'll see there's a myriad of issues that have caused the event. I think Natalie's right. I think there is a focus on the operator and the who. Quite often when you've got a ground event or a ground damage event, the investigation can be very quick and dirty. And I think the level or the quality of investigation can really be enhanced in ground safety or ground damage events. I'd like to see more focus on that investigation in terms of any organisational issues that we face, both as a service provider and an operator. I think there'll be human factors elements in there that are quite often not covered, documentation, training, all those kind of things. And if you do that proper root cause analysis and really focus on the investigation, where you can extract really sound recommendations, that's the only way you'll make change. If you focus on the individual, do the retraining or the discipline, you've not really, or you may not have solved the problem. You've just kind of masked the problem in that one solution. So absolutely, it's a shared responsibility. I'm always nervous with the term shared responsibility. It sometimes, for some stakeholders, implies a diminished responsibility. Okay, now it's shared, kind of the responsibility is less mine. That's not the case. But what it means, in my view, is if there's going to be a shared responsibility, it then becomes a collaboration between the stakeholders, and it's absolutely vital that the responsibility is clearly defined during that collaboration so that everyone's aware of their own responsibilities. And then we find that the ground service provider, the operator, the engineers, the fuel trucks, the catering trucks, all aware of their responsibility.
Sorry, can I just pick up there then about collaboration really between the operators and the service providers? Now, I think you're okay in Dubai, you have a monopoly, if you like, don't you, in the ground handling side, and pretty much a dominant airline on the other. So it's quite simple there. But what happens when you've got multiple airlines as your customers? The collaboration, we know that the airlines all have their own different service level agreements. They've all got their different procedures. How does that work in collaboration when you've got to collaborate with 120 different airlines?
It's a nightmare, and it actually comes down to commercial contracts, SLAs and price. And obviously the margins in ground handling are quite narrow. So we often agree to things so that we can get the contract. But without really considering the impact on the operations and how our people are going to expect to turn around the flights. We have a real issue right now in that because we are the monopoly, the sole ground handler, you would think it's easy, but it's probably more challenging than if we were one of many ground handlers, in that we handle over 100 different airlines. We handle over 500 flights a week across 2 airports. For the port operators, the ground staff, they have to carry around these little pocketbooks. So we have 26 different cone configurations around an aircraft, depending on which airline wants what type of cone configurations. Cone configuration should be standard. Same with chocking procedures. 36 different chocking procedures because we've entered into all these different agreements with the airlines. So for me, that increases our exposure to risk, and because the poor operators or the ground staff just can't be expected to remember this, and they go from one flight to the next, and you know, it could be the same aircraft type but different airline, different requirements. So it probably brings us on to the sort of the regulation question. It just absolutely baffles me why ground handling has not been regulated, because this would eliminate this risk for us. And yes, we have ISARGO, but even with ISARGO, there's still room for airlines to require different ways of operating their aircraft for things that actually should be standard. So I'm a big advocate of regulation and bringing that in for the ground handling operations, because that will really, really help us.
I would agree with that, and I would suggest that, and I'm speaking as an operator, I think it's something the operators can definitely look at. Natalie's talking about 100 different airlines that they service, and with that 100 different airlines there will be 100 we know better departments, yes. As each airline demonstrates that they know better on how to chock an airplane and so on and so forth. So I think if there's a consensus of operators to align in terms of the services provided with the use of IGOM and then monitored via ISARGO, if that's enforced with regulation, we can harmonise so many of the ground operations procedures that will simplify the work for the service providers. There's a more consistency then in their service provision, and we can reduce the possibility of events and incidents. So I think that's something the operators can do in harmony with the regulators to help the service providers.
Yeah, great.
Mohamad, how do you see that, the confusion, if you like, over the many different standards?
From the growth we faced and the expected growth, it is expected that more than 380 million passengers expected to travel within the Middle East countries during the coming period, which means we shall have more aircrafts, more departures, more airports, maybe expansion of airports, more subcontracted companies, and eventually more handlers. The problem is bigger than what it is now. I think we should lay down the system, then develop, maintain and develop it. To synchronize all activities within this system. There should be unified procedures, unified approach, unified understanding between the parties in this industry, mainly airlines, ground handlers, and the airports as well. Because in the extension of the airports and the airport layouts, the civil aviation authorities, through ICAO or individually, can play a very big role in enforcing discipline and regulations regarding the movement on ramp and the recruitment issues and the standards of training, since they can, for instance, mandate IOSA and ISEGO for every handler and every airline. It should be considered and rated and valued.
You know, in most cases, ISEGO is treated as a certificate on the wall. That practical implications or implementation of that is far from where it needs to be. And I agree with you, that would be an ideal world where we all have a unified approach, everyone working in the airport community, providers, operators. I just don't see it happening. And why is it not happening? And are we doing enough to move into the direction of
let's take that.
collaboration?
Why isn't it happening? If you could all collaborate, if you could work together, why doesn't it happen?
Yeah.
For instance, on Saturday, a couple of days ago, I was informed before my travel that one of the ground handlers at Rafiq Hariri Beirut International Airport, the airport authorities will suspend their certification. The airport authorities can play a very big role in this aspect. And IATA as well. IATA through IGOM, IATA Ground Operations Manual, unifying procedures, simplifying the processes, to agree on it. It will be a big help and build a big containment to the threat as is being described. I think we are all in it. We are all parties paying the cost. No one by itself is the only responsible. We should collaborate and cooperate through regional and international organization to be on top of the expectations.
In fairness, I would suggest that the regulators, that there is a desire, there is a journey. We're on that journey, but we're very early in that journey. We've just looked previously at the drones and the drone issues, and somebody said, I wouldn't like to be a regulator trying to look after that, and we need regulation, and regulation's playing catch-up. We've seen the same in terms of security and overflight, and our regulators playing catch-up in overflight, and it's the same in ground safety as well. There's a desire there, but the pace of which regulation is coming in is slow. But I do see with IGOM, with ISAGO, and with meetings like this, there is a desire amongst all parties to move forward, including regulators. So I think we are on the right path. Like a lot of things, it's not moving quick enough. Things aren't moving quick enough for us.
Yeah.
But is it because if we talking about the idea of the drones earlier, that it's got to have something monumental to go horribly wrong before regulation happens? The majority of the incidents that you have in the ground handling area are generally minor in compared to catastrophe. So does that sort of stop, or do you really need a really
disagree.
big bang?
I think it's because it's not very much in the public domain. By far for us at dnata in our ground handling is that workplace injuries are huge. It's a very dangerous environment out there. And I think because most people focus on what happens with the aircraft, particularly when it's in flight, the visibility of the dangerous environment on the ground is sometimes forgotten. So it was interesting, the figures that you quoted earlier, but for us, the injury rate is by far higher than the equipment damage and flight damage. And what we've started to do at dnata is actually not just look at the pure number, but look at the severity classification and also look at the potential. So yes, we may have just touched an aircraft, but what was the potential for that to have been much worse? Yes, someone might have got a first aid cut or a bruise, but was the potential for them to be seriously injured or be a fatality? So I think the way we look at how we measure safety in our performance is part of that, but being a bit more public and sharing that information, desensitizing it obviously, but having a common a standard in which we measure and share safety performance will play a part.
Okay. Do we have any questions from the floor? Down here, please. Joachim first. Thank you. Got 1, 2, 3.
Thank you, Joachim, from Qatar Civil Aviation Authority. I think we have regulation in place. And one of our biggest, let's say, challenge is to audit, for example, all 157 line stations, outstation what Qatar Airways has. On top of that, helicopter bases and so on. We approve the GOM, we approve the GSM, and we found out if you go to the line station, there is a need for, let's say, station-related quality standards and procedure manual to define the interfaces locally on the place. And then, if you do then the oversight, you can really easily identify the threats. We tackled problems with tow bars, marshalling, some habit in procedures, FOD as a case, then worn equipment and interfaces, the cleaning of water, trucks and everything. That requires on the other side if you look over the fence, your inspector must be trained on the ISAGO. So we send everybody to an ISAGO auditor course. So the loop is round, and we know also each other from one of the inspection. But I can tell you, for Middle East, it was super. So that was a good audit in Beirut. But we have to do the oversight, and the regulations are in place, because if you carry out an AOC, you are also responsible to look for the line station outstation. The problem is a lot of regulators that do not, because they have not the proper trained personnel to carry it out properly. So you can tick a box, X-ray for package is there, but if you have not the knowledge how to do it and how worn the equipment maybe is, or do they just on the entrance of an airport, or so you tackle also the security area, you cannot do, and then we have that gaps. But I think the regulation are there. We have the IATA regulation, we have all over the world the OPS regulation, and we have to do oversight, and we have the Annex 19.
So the regulations already are there, we just don't have them in.
Not for the ground handling operations. And I think that, you know, with dnata operating and supporting so many airlines, you know, we have a full audit schedule every year. Even though we are ISAGO certified, you know, every airline comes and audits us. I think last year we had 46 different airline audits. So the argument would be, well, if we're actually certified to operate at minimum standard, then why would we need so many airline audits? So debate.
Sorry, I'm not agree. As an regulator, you have to carry out an AOC. Part of the AOC is a ground operation, so you approve the ground operations manual. In the ground operations manual is noted how they do the ground operation. Then we have the Chapter 3, quality system, safety management system, that defines how they do the subcontractor audit and so on. So from my opinion, there is only a gap. The regulation is there. It must be executed.
But why do we see such variation then?
Maybe a lot of authorities do not execute. I have always a discussion with my operator. Why you're doing that? Are you traveling there, doing that and that? We improve the safety. We have our reporting system, okay? And then always other authorities do not. And that answers the question.
Can I just ask them, Joachim, can I just pick up on what you said there? Because you say that, you know, you go in and do an audit, and you've had 46 audits in the last year. Were they all the same audit? Were they all asking the same questions? Or is Qatar's question different from Lebanon's question, different from
do you know,
the US?
it's same but different. So absolutely is. Kind of the same things, but said in a different way with different expectations. So one airline might give us a observation, another airline might give us a non-conformity. And this is the problem, is that there is no standardization. As much as what we like to think there is, and it's certainly an aspiration, but from a ground handler's perspective, we're not there yet. Absolutely not there yet.
I think, you're quite right. I mean, the audit process is a really important part, and we do see, you know, the executive powers to then enforce the changes needed when you've got the observations and the findings aren't there, and you know that's the kind of not closing of the loop that's not going on. But I'd like to see things to be picked up earlier. Now, when operators are looking to issue contracts to service providers, quite often the negotiations take place in almost exclusively around price. Negotiation and price almost go hand in hand as words. And by the time the price is agreed, then we run down the contract. Safety or SMS is number 14 or 15 on the list. What I'd like to see in terms of negotiation with service providers is the operator saying, okay, the starting point for this negotiation is, can you talk me through your SMS as a service provider? Can you give me practical examples of where your SMS has reduced accidents, incidents, ground damage, personal damage? And if you find a service provider can very comfortably give you this information, okay, we move on to the next stage of negotiation, which ultimately will come down to price. But if you find a service provider saying, perhaps they're not the service provider for you. Now, we're not always have the luxury of several service providers, but I think the starting point being SMS implementation, and genuine display of practical improvements made because of an SMS is a good starting point for negotiation.
Agreed.
Mohammed?
I think the negotiations goes on with figures in mind and with SLAs in mind. I think some of the charges, of the agreements are not fair. They are accepted just not to let the customer out or the other handler. And the SLAs, most of the time, some items or most of the items are accepted, but I know very well, perhaps you share me, this vision that every airport, we should tailor an SLA for every airport, especially that the security measures for the time being is affecting ground handling activities. So we cannot negotiate a pre-prepared SLA. We shall negotiate a factual SLA according to the situation and the conditions in which we are operating. Because we all very well know that we have an SMS and we have nearly somewhat a database, but which is the core to which we should start, I think, solving this issue. We don't have a reliable ground damage database to analyze it. The operators have data, the service providers have another one, the airports have third one, and they are newly launched. For instance, IATA launched as the ground damage database in 2012. The ASA this year, they developed their tool. And the airports are somewhere, I don't know where, but the ICAO, through the Security Information Exchange, Global Safety Information Exchange, they could launch something to help. So I think we should sit together, focusing on how to collect our data. Proper information, unified information, in order to allow us identify, analyze in the same manner, in the same method, find out the causal factors, and find out the remedies. Because, for instance, we are talking about operators and equipment, which affects the budget of every airline, of every company, of every service provider. And everyone in this field, we have to reduce the staff to meet the charges are being paid. We have, it is a global issue. We have high turnover. Not a worker is being paid what he should. We are losing experience. Most of our newcomers are in transit. They are waiting for the first opportunity to leave. We have less training. There are factors very heavy on our burdens, but we, in order to set an action plan for the remedy, we should know exactly, or as much as possible, the causal factor after each investigation, because some cases I know, we don't reach the end of the investigation for a reason or another. So we need quality reporting, proper information, unified data, and sit down to analyze in order to get to identify where the problem is or where the problems are in order to start remedy.
Data first will do it. Okay. Take the gentleman here, please.
Yeah, hi, good morning. My name is Sharjil Rehan, and I look after regional HSSE and compliance for Shell Aviation. My question is around competence assurance, because, I mean, we've heard really good things in this discussion so far about root cause analysis, incident investigation, shared responsibilities, collaboration. It's all great. I think most of the investigations reveal gaps around competence, and the outcome is, or the remedial actions are mostly around doing more trainings. My question is, do we have a minimum or a benchmark for the people that we induct? So what we just heard about losing experience and not having the right people, or probably not paying enough in the industry and so on. So do we have a benchmark for the people? Because we can have all the documents in the world and all the trainings that we want to do, but if we don't have the right people to understand, those trainings are meaningless in my view. Thank you.
I think it's a combination of all of those, but more. Training is not the answer. Certainly SOPs, regulations aren't the answer. What we're trying to do at dnata is look at the organisational culture and how it supports safety improvements, performance, or it doesn't. So it's all very well putting people through a classroom training, but what's more important is how is that supported and sustained actually out in the operation. And unless you've got supervisors with safety leadership skills who are supporting their teams and actually holding them accountable to work efficiently, safely, then everything that's learnt in the classroom is forgotten, because the culture out in the operations is, oh yeah, we don't do that here, we do it a different way. So training is part of the answer, but not the complete answer. As well, the problem with over-engineering the compliance side of things is that the reality out in the operations is that they do something different. And typically, if the supervisor or manager is around, they'll do what they're supposed to do according to the SMS procedures. But when the supervisor's not around, that's when we see incidents happen. So they find a different way of doing things. So it's compliance and commitment. You know, people need to understand and see the hazards, the risks, have that commitment to work safely for their own safety and for their colleagues, but do it all the time, so that safety needs to be integrated in everything that you do and how you think, not an add-on. So it's not the last thing in the commercial contract, it's not the last thing you talk about in your shift briefings, it's not the last thing that we go, oh, and safely, on-time performance, oh, and safely. Because if we keep doing that, then it's always an afterthought. It's not ingrained in who we are and what we do.
But if it's culture, and if you're recruiting the wrong people because the margins are so thin you can't afford to recruit the right people, is it ever going to get better no matter how much you say safety is the first thing before we talk about money? Surely money is more important in the first place. Have we ever introduced it?
It's a good point. Have you ever heard of the phrase, you've got to spend money to make money? It's kind of like that with safety. You're not going to actually make significant improvements in your safety performance or the culture of your organisation without investing. And that investment needs to be over a period of time. You're not going to fix it overnight, but prioritise what are your immediate needs and work on that and actually implement it but sustain it. So yeah, it's not an easy thing, but if you select the right people, how do you select the right people? Do you ask safety related questions in the interview process? Is it part of your job description? And we found that safety wasn't in even accountability. So guess what? Our HR teams were recruiting against the job description where safety wasn't actually in there. So no wonder we end up with people with no experience or the qualifications, skill sets that we're looking for if it's not even in the job description. So it's going further and further back and really deep into your organisation and the culture and actually tackling those aspects. So, and gradually you'll see improvements.
Sorry, Mark.
While we're discussing training, the training focus, generally speaking, in a lot of disciplines, including ground handling, is focused on the physical activity, the driving equipment, the adherence to rules, the way you conduct yourself in and around aeroplanes. there's very little training in terms of awareness and internal awareness and behavioural training. And what I mean by that is we see a lot of ground damage events and incidents when things are out of the ordinary. When you see time pressures because of slot restrictions, we talked about the airspace being closed earlier because of the drone activity, the compression that that causes, the challenge of moving the aeroplanes once the airport reopens, the challenge of getting the aeroplanes moved in and out to make connections is vast. Now that's an emotional challenge where in this industry, in this wonderful industry, we're very, very goal-orientated. The majority of us who are employed in this industry are goal-orientated. And when you see a scheduled time of departure on your worksheet, you work to that and you work as hard as you possibly can to achieve that. Now, do we make any training or any reference to the ground staff at supervisory level and at the doing level of that feeling of we're pushing too hard? You know, we're cutting corner after corner to achieve this aeroplane's on-time departure, whereas a 20-minute delay to that departure is far better than an AOG because of ground damage. So it's the training of awareness and your own behaviour, thinking, stop, we're pushing too hard here. And I don't think we address that at all in any of our training for ground service providers.
But doesn't that come back to the who are the supervisors? Where are the supervisors coming from? If people are leaving your organisations because you're lousy employers, who's getting promoted into the supervisory roles?
Typically, it's whoever's been there longest and whoever is the best pushback operator, rather than the ones that are the best motivators, leaders, collaborators, and you know, I think the understanding of the role of a supervisor is very different to what it needs to be. I think the role of the supervisor can be the person that does the admin and writes the shift reports, deals with customer queries, rather than actually be there managing and supervising the team of people that they're responsible for. We've lost that along the way, so you know, and that's critical.
And I think Solly's point about how many zeros there were on the end and the cost of a delay, you've got to imagine what type of person is going to have the courage and have been empowered enough to go, actually, I'm going to just hold this flight back 20 minutes. I know it's going to cost zeros, but I'm going to do that. So, you know, maybe there's a whole thing about changing the way the perception the airlines have of the ground services when they're negotiating the contracts to, in the first place, to be aware of the challenge. Come down here, sir.
Jihad Fakir. I am from IATA Middle East office based in Amman. I am the head of safety flight operations. I would like maybe to give some background on the activities we conduct in the Middle East. I'm not talking about outside the Mid area, but definitely Middle East is the area we are looking at. With regard with the ground handling and services, as mentioned earlier with ISEGO, this was launched based on the input from the airlines, because the industry were suffering a lot of losses with the ground incidents. And this is why we launched this initiative. In the Middle East, we have almost a very good coverage of the ISEGO audits. However, we have one what we call the ISEGO pool with the airlines, where airlines will contribute with some expertise after they are trained by IATA to conduct the audits. Now, with dnata, they said 42 audits they are subjected every year. Because maybe the airline based in Dubai is not member of the ISEGO pool. If they are member, they could maybe save you maybe 10, 15 audits, I'm sure. So the pool with the airlines is also to minimize the cost of audits. It was mentioned earlier by Qatar that they have to go to audit all stations every year. Now, being in the pool, you will save maybe a lot of efforts and expertise traveling all around. This pool, really, we need to drive it within the mid area because it's for the benefit of the ground service providers as well as for the airlines, because also they will save money. ISEGO was developed because an absence of a regulated business on the ground services, and really it's a good tool for the time being. I would like to highlight that we have in the Middle East, we have Regional Air Navigation Safety Group, which is composed of all regional organizations, along with the industry stakeholders, Boeing, Airbus, everybody. And in that group, they have developed also the statistics on safety. Now, the ground damage, it was one of the high rated incidents and maybe non-fatal accidents. And there is a plan to address those issues through the Regional Aviation Safety Group. They have set the mid-region safety targets. And one of the targets says we need to have at least 75% of ground handling services to be certified by ISAGO by end of 2017. One other thing, the IGOM, the ground handling manual, and now it has to be endorsed by the Med-States, by all Med-States, that they have at least 60% of implementation. You know, this is the ICAO USAP findings, but the states who are well developed, they have to endorse that by end of 2017. So we have some good guidelines to address the ISAGO. Now, with the ground damage database, also based on the industry input, in 2011, we launched the ground data damage database, and we have so far 29 airlines contributing to the information. To give you an example, just we have 21 airlines who submitted information for the fourth quarter of 2013. Normally what we do analysis, provide statistical information to the members who subscribe, also with guidelines on how to alleviate those incidents, ground incidents. In one quarter, we have 42 reports from 21 airlines, and really it's a very big number. Now imagine if we have in the mid around IATA members, we have 35, but definitely we have more than 50 airlines. We have 21 airlines around the world, of which maybe we have 2 or 3 from the mid area who provide the incident reports. Also, we need to drive, as mentioned by our colleague from Middle East, we need to get more airlines to subscribe to database. It's free of charge, but definitely they will at least get benefits of the incidents happened around, and maybe with the mitigation measures, the advices, and also they use it for benchmarking. Thank you.
You make good points, and for me that's a really good example of proactive safety management. I think ground safety has been very reactive for a long time, and since the inception of ISAGO, we started to see more proactive safety management. I agree, I think carriers are reluctant, or some carriers are reluctant to provide the data to the ground damage database. It's not just that, there's flight data and other things. There's always a nervousness about sharing your events. Which needs to be addressed. So I think that's it. But I also, you know, when we look at reactive and proactive safety management, I'd like to see predictive safety management in the fact that ground damage event is already an event. There's already damage, there's already cost, there's already disruption. I'd like to see more predictive management in hazard reporting. You know, for every damage we have, there will be 20 near misses. And I would suggest in ground safety, those 20 near misses will not be reported. Now, if we get the reports of near misses, and we're comfortable to receive those hazard reports without any punitivity, we can then start to be predictive in the fact that if this is unchecked, these near misses will turn into actual events. So the ground damage database is good for actual damage, but can we be even more forward-thinking and start really pushing our staff to report the hazards, the nearly selves, to start building up that picture of predictive safety management.
Actually, we have an SMS in place. But as I had said before, we have a problem with the operators, with the workers, problem in training. We had a high turnover. We are losing experience. By the way, it is frequently discussion goes between we are the old-timers in our company, that simply things are changing quickly, and no one is like us. Perhaps they will say no one like them later on, but They are, as I said, transiting. We have little experience. We encouraged open reporting, some incentives. We declared non-punitive policy. We are concentrating on the leadership aspect of the issue. So we introduced some 3 years ago sessions composing of, for instance, 2 captains, 2 rank coordinators, 2 engineers, 2 dispatchers, etc., and just sit together to discuss and follow up on issues on ground, just to have a unified approach, unified understanding in order to address some risk appetite on the level of some workers. We are trying to build something which is, I think, is still vague, safety culture or human factors which are newly introduced. We have them in Arabic and English. We have in so many levels. We are paying, our training budget is increased every year, just to try to build this safety culture. Because I read an article some days ago that a new recruit, when he joins a company, he is 90% up to act according to the rules. But whenever he sees someone is compromising, he immediately drops to 50% of the rules. So we are trying to focus on the leaders, on the supervisors, and on the different cultural background of the staff available or hired. Especially, we should go, and everyone, I think, is going like this, according to the law, supply and demand, which define the wages, whether they are enough or not. I still recall last year, maybe in November, in the Ground Handling Conference International, there is a global problem regarding the wages being paid for the workers. So, we have little expectations, but we are working more on these issues in order to have safety behind every act or behavior of the staff in action.
I want to just pick up on something you said there about where you got a group of people together and kind of the pilots and the ground handling teams and collaborate there to do that. Mark, I don't know if you could just share with us the rollback incident, because I think that's a cracking example.
Yeah, no problem. It's a practical indication of some work that was done last year. Was at Emirates, we went through a spate of rollback incidents where the aircraft were pulling onto stand, parking brake set, and then for whatever reason the parking brake being unset and the aeroplane rolling back before it was chocked. Now the frequency of those events was relatively low, but the consequence of those events is very high. If you're a person placing chocks behind a 38 or a 777 wheel and you get caught by that wheel, it's going to take more than a plaster to put you right. And also the aircraft damage or the equipment damage in terms of air bridges, aircraft doors, and other kind of service equipment is huge. Now, I talked at the top of this piece about good investigations. A full investigation was launched because of the possible consequences of this, and it found all kinds of organisational issues, documentation issues. There was a complete disconnect between the engineering procedures and the words that engineers use when passing information to the flight crew. The flight crew documentation had a different set of words again. There was no guidance for the chocking staff in terms of we had one incident where the chocks were placed at the front of the wheels first, not the back of the wheels, and we found a whole host of organisational issues that needed to be addressed. As part of that, we pulled together the staff involved, we pulled together middle management, and we also pulled together the post holders for engineering, flight operations, ground services, and the handling agent. Got together in a room, no agenda. We talked through the various incidents and events, and it was enlightening that we saw all these issues that everyone was completely unaware of. As a result of that, this is where we talk about shared responsibility, and we ensured it was great to see at the meeting this realization and this kind of taking down of silos where the different departmental heads who are accountable, the post holders, were seeing this kind of dichotomy of stuff going on. So when we left the meeting, there was a clear responsibility defined in terms of what each accountable manager would take back and middle management would take back. The training to the flight crew, there was a heightened awareness to the flight crew about the importance of not releasing the parking brake until there's been clear wordage that the chocks are in place and defined wordage. There was also guidance in terms of flight crew looking out, seeing a fixed part of the airport when they release the brake so they can notice aircraft movement very quickly. Defined guidance about where to chock the aeroplane, which wheels to chock first, how far to put the chocks to the ground staff. Engineers were highlighted the specific wordage that must be used, and we kind of rolled out this whole myriad of changes and focus on this particular set of events, and we saw the incident rate just drop off a cliff. And from flight safety's perspective, to see what was good SMS in action, and then to provide the data to show that these changes had made a difference was really quite rewarding. I'd just like to see it happen more frequently.
I was going to say, but do you share that with other airlines and with other airports, with other handlers? I mean, is it publicised enough so, you know, Qatar might suddenly go, wow, we've had a load of those, well, we've been rolling back over people's feet?
Probably not enough, and I think probably forums like this are a good opportunity, and you know, the networking lunch that we have is an opportunity to share these things. It's like a lot of things, and flight crew, ground crew, engineers are the same. You know, we like to listen to practical stories in our own field of where things have gone right, things have gone wrong, and we learn from it. So I think perhaps we don't do enough in terms of sharing certainly our events, but more importantly, do we do enough of sharing our successes, where people can take away and perhaps think about implementing the same things in their own organisations.
Good. Question here, please. Second table in. Thank you.
My name is Khalid from Presidential Flight Abu Dhabi. I would like to give some points about equipment operators. They are the lowest level of staff in a ground handling company, dealing with the aircraft worth $200 million, connecting the passenger stairs or pushing back. Maybe if they make it AOG, any aircraft, and you know how much direct and indirect cost it will cost them. But for last 20 years, equipment operators levels are same, you know. The minimum education qualification for them is not even a high school degree. They just train them, anybody, they hire them, having a driving license, and then they train them. And for last 20 years, if you go for the engineering department, for the LAEs and engineers, they have courses. So in my opinion, airlines should spend more time on training, time, and qualified staff should be hired as an equipment operators.
Very good point. Commercial considerations for that. I'm not saying that that's an excuse. However, you know, as a ground handler, we're in a very competitive environment with the airlines, so that pushes the price down, and that also then has an impact on, you know, what kind of people we can employ at what levels. I think that we probably, what we're starting to think about at dnata is perhaps a different profile of person and training for those that work within the ERA, particularly working close proximity to the aircraft. Again, you know, is it the equipment operator's fault? No, he's just been employed to do a job. But as an organisation, we need to think about how best we employ, train, and supervise and support our people working in the ERA. So I think there's a lot more work to be done there.
Yes, my name is Elias Sadek. I'm Vice President Safety and Quality in Egypt Air. 2 points I'd like to make. The first is alcohol and drug testing. Where do you go from there? This was a problem in my airline. And we started, we measured it, and we found that it's relatively high, so we stopped making it random, and we increased the percentage. And sometimes we made on everybody, like we'll go to a section when the workload is low, and we'll get everybody there. We'll get the special truck, and everybody goes. And a person, of course, obviously refuses to take the test, he's considered on probation or whatever, or on suspension. First point. Second point is quality control. The lady just said that when the supervisor is around, things are better. So I think that the selection of the supervisor has to be revised. The procedure, who should be the supervisor? It's not the person with maybe a better understanding of paperwork, or a person who, but a person who really thinks safety, a person who is able to be trained, and not everybody is trained. It could be trained. A good selection process, and then I'll train the right person, and he will deliver whatever is required from him from safety. Thank you.
Anybody want to comment on drugs?
Well, I think drug and alcohol testing, we have over 19,000 people that work at dnata. So to do that for everyone, every shift, we'd never actually be able to turn around any aircraft. So what we do random drug and alcohol testing, and we make sure that we meet a minimum percentage of our employee population on shift. But what's more important is, in the event that something has happened or nearly happened, we obviously conduct drug and alcohol testing of the individuals involved. Very rarely do we find a situation where a person tests positive. With regard to your second point, sorry, what was the second point around?
About the supervisors.
Supervisors, yeah.
Selecting the right ones.
Yeah, absolutely. It goes down, as I said earlier, having the right job description, accountabilities, KPIs that they're responsible for, from the recruitment, how you assess them, how you select them, how you develop them. I believe that you can develop everyone. So I think there are some key safety leadership skills, best practices that you'd like to see in supervisors. It's just integrating that into your whole HR recruitment, development processes. Yeah.
Thank you. Just go over to there first, and then we'll come to this table here. Thank you.
Thank you. It's Martin Chalk from IFALPA. A question for Mark. I'd like to pull together a couple of things you said, Mark. One was how can we develop the incident reporting system into a more predictive system by looking at hazards that did not result in damage. And then your story, or your description of using events that had damaged airplanes because of rollbacks, because of the chock versus brakes conundrum at shutdown. And I wondered, I've the handicap of having grown up in aviation in the Western world, where there is one particular culture underlying reporting and handling of issues. And in that part of the world, the challenge tends to be incentivizing reporting. There's not necessarily a negative, a push against reporting, but there's certainly often no pull. And I know in other parts of the world, and maybe in this part of the world, the underlying culture might be more of a push against reporting. And it's how we in aviation can set aside the local culture, be it one way or the other, and in our business create the right circumstances that people feel it is both desired and effective use of their time to make sure that when one of your pilots noticed that they'd been asked to release the brakes, but they had realized it was not yet a good time, did they report that? And were you given the non-damage reports prior to actually having the damage reports? And that's sort of tying together with what you were saying about the ground damage. I think it's a challenge everywhere, and I want to emphasize I don't want to pick on any part of the world, because I think the challenge varies, but it's a challenge everywhere to get open reporting that is effective, that doesn't waste people's time, and that doesn't result in them feeling either undervalued or any sort of fear.
Absolutely, and reporting, you know, across the piece, if we're honest, the reporting culture in certain parts of our business, and I would suggest ground operations is one of them, the reporting culture is better not to report than report. So there's a cultural change that needs to take place. I think it's worth looking at incentivising reporting, particularly hazard reporting. That's an area of focus that we've moved on for the flight crew, which is becoming effective. In fairness, at the flight crew level, they're more aware of the maturity of the SMS and they're more on board with the benefits of hazard reporting. At ground operational level, we're not seeing the hazard reports. I think it's a predictive element we need to move towards. There's 2 or 3 aspects to that. The first of all is the provision of a reporting mechanism. We've talked about the level of education in ground operations being relatively low compared to the rest of the industry. So we've got language barriers, we've got reading and writing issues, we've got people who can't read and write English. Certainly in our organisation, we're moving with our safety reporting system to enable pictorial reporting. We're moving a lot in terms of promotion to, dare I say, Mr. Bean style promotional videos in terms of safety responsibility, safety reporting, so that the language barrier is removed. And you can be very effective with that and very creative with that kind of video education that is fun, that's engaging. We have a video that involves children dressed as adults on the ramp, showing them various safety events and the reporting of them. If you demonstrate to the wider workforce where people have reported, their colleagues have reported hazards that have resulted in change for the good, and then you've incentivized that with rewards, be it a mobile phone, be it an iPad, be it a recognition, be it a promotion, whatever it might be, that can be really powerful amongst their peers. So I think this is a good area where we can expand and try and change the reporting culture by demonstrating the positivity of the reports that have taken place.
Right, lead by example. And gentleman in the blue shirt here, please.
Hello, Khaldun Al-Asfar, Airport Duty Manager with dnata at DWC and a student with London City University. Just wanted to share that I think that no matter how much we discuss SOPs, procedures, training, the fact of the matter is that we have a human element there that is involved. So incidents are bound to happen. They might happen on different levels, whether it's minor, it's major. But the thing is that I feel it has more to do with, as shared earlier by our colleagues, with culture and, most importantly, attitude towards the way we do things. So an example that comes to mind from the region here is hierarchy, for example. We preach staff and we tell them, okay, you should report, or you should do it this way, or you should not take shortcuts. But once they see us passing by the aircraft just for a simple follow-up or monitor on a certain flight, they tend to, rush things at times. So that's something that is within the culture and how they were doing things for so many years, which leads me to the attitude bit. So going back to what our colleagues mentioned in regards to near-miss reporting, generally, I honestly, from personal experience, what I have seen is that if nothing happens, it's not reported. So a mechanism, a reporting mechanism that's set by a body enforcer, someone that enforces this reporting mechanism that says that near misses or situations that might have resulted in some, regardless of the level of incident, minor or major, has to be reported. Now, to do that, to tackle that, is the attitude bit of the staff that we have to change over a period of time. So staff or employees have to understand that it is a no-blame culture, as Ms. Natalie highlighted earlier. It should be intuitive, you should immediately report something that that doesn't seem safe for you. Thank you.
Good point there. And actually, Natalie, if I can just pick up one thing here, because if, you know, do you report it if you didn't think there was any damage? Changing aeroplanes, the 787 composite design, that's a problem. If you hit one of those, it might not show. So what happens then?
Well, it keeps me awake. I think our ground staff, I mean, an aircraft's no different to a car. It's just a lot bigger in some respects. Bear with me. So when you ding your car, you can physically see the damage. So it's when you touch an aircraft and you can see the damage, you go, oh, I need to report it. So we're pretty good at that. But the composite aircraft, for me, it's dangerous, because if you touch it and you can't see any physical damage, how do you explain to ground staff operators that it doesn't matter if you can't see anything, the internal structural damage can be quite severe and catastrophic, actually. So it's kind of tied to near misses. It's like something nearly happened, but it didn't. You touched an aircraft and you nearly dented it, but you didn't. So it's that awareness of people, and you know, they'll only report things if they understand why and what's in it for them. And I'm not talking about reward. I'm talking about, well, actually, you wouldn't want to be injured if that turned into an actual occurrence. I think we just focus so much on the reactive reporting and safety measuring, and not enough on the proactive. You know, a simple solution might be to introduce a KPI, a safety KPI, around number of near misses and hazards reported as compared to your actual incidents that have happened. It should be a higher percentage. I mean, you know, the accident triangle, well, right now at dnata it's a diamond, because, you know, it's the recordable injuries and incidents that are more so than the hazards and the near misses. So.
Okay. It is a culture change. I think, ladies and gentlemen, tragically we've come to the end of our hour, and I thought we could have got on for a bit more then. I think there's a lot to be done on this, and put that onto your plan for next year as well.